Good evening, everyone. Here we are once again. It's our first meeting in English of 2019. Like always, every second Monday of the month, we have this English meeting. And tonight we're going to have Juliana here in a few minutes reading the inspirational message for us from the book Our Daily Bread. And then we're going to have Hendrick talking to us about the gospel according to Spiritism. Tonight, talking about voluntary torments. And before we begin, we would like to let everyone know that this next month in February, on February 24th, we're going to have Divaldo Franco again here with us. And it's important for us to say this in English as well, because when he comes, there's always English translation or interpretation. So if you know anyone that wants or needs to hear the message from him today, this year, he'll talk about fraternity for a better world. So we all need to be better brothers and sisters to everybody, and he's going to talk a little bit about fraternity. So that will be February 23rd. It will be in Somerville on a Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. So we are all invited. We have the tickets here, but they are also selling the tickets online at the website of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts, which is akssma.com. So they have the tickets to sell there. And after this brief announcement, we would like to invite everyone to close our eyes if you wish to do so that we can do our initial prayer and to focus even more and think about the good spirits and their blessings in our lives. Think about Jesus, our friend, our brother, and above all, think about and thank God for everything. So we would like to thank them for their blessings, for their presence in our lives. Thank them for the grace of being alive, of being here, of having this chance and this opportunity of gathering together around these words of love, these thoughts of harmony, and this movement of peace that we are all invited to be part of, which is the movement of the betterment of the world. So may these blessings touch our hearts, fill our souls with hope, so that we can all together, the incarnates and the discarnates, think of a better world, so that we can put these words into practice on our daily lives. And with this, we would like to ask the blessings of the good spirits for tonight's meeting. So be it. So now we would like to invite Juliana. She'll read for us from the book Our Daily Bread and make us a brief comment about it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's message from Our Daily Bread is chapter 106. There's a big difference. Then Peter said, I have neither silver nor gold, but I give to you. Acts chapter 3, verse 6. It's right to recommend much caution to those who are interested in the advantage of human politics and who are referenced to Jesus in the gospel to explain certain absurdities in matters of social theory. Nearly always, human law addresses the governed by using this formula: whatever you have belongs to me. Christianity, however, through Peter-inspired lips, proclaims to all, Whatever I have given to you. Have you ever thought about how great the world will be when men and women decide to give what they possess from the construction of the universal evolution? In ordinary charity work at public charitable institution, individuals rarely offer to their neighbors what may be regarded as their own instinct qualities. Could anyone base genuine service to the eternal good entirely on the perishable possession on earth? Generous individuals may distribute money and useful things to the needy on their path, but they will not kindle within themselves the light and joy that are born from these gifts if they do not give them with a sentiment of love, which in essence it is their imperishable and true wealth. Everyone brings with them the worthy qualities that they have already attained, and which enables them to continue to advance in the realm of spiritual acquisition of a higher order. Do not forget the loving words of Peter. Give of yourself in your endeavor of salvation, for those who are awaiting for the gold or silver in order to perform good deeds are truly still far from the ability to help themselves. This passage is really interesting to me because it's a reminder to us how we, see ourselves. Maybe you can give yourself this question, but when was the last time you've actually donated a true piece of yourself? And what I mean is, what is the last time when you donated your time, your years to a friend in need of a conversation? When you truly did something that came from the heart and not necessarily because you have to. And this is what Peter here, Emmanuel, is saying is, don't donate. We can donate material goods, but don't donate without actually giving a piece of yourself, a piece of that heart, of the true positive acknowledgement of this donation. I feel like when we look at ourselves in the world that we live today, and as always, it's very easy to donate something to a charity or to somebody else and think, I did good, I think I did good with God. I got a little bit more points with God. And that's not really part of the evolution that we as human beings need to do. Because what Peter and also Emmanuel was saying here is that if we don't donate a little piece of ourselves, then what is the light that we're building or finding within ourselves? What is the evolution that we are growing? And when we don't necessarily do something from the heart, we are not putting thought. We could donate something, a material good, we can donate money to a charity, but if we don't actually think, whether we donate a prayer, we donate something that it truly comes from a genuine place in ourselves, then what is the difference? And I guess in his question, there's no difference in the good deeds that you're making. So what he's trying to do is call ourselves to the next time when we do something, do it from somewhere within that matters. Don't do it just from a material standpoint, but do it from really because you want to. Whether it's a prayer, a time of your day to a friend, or just a genuine care for one another. I think that is a much bigger donation than anything else that we can physically give to one another. Thank you. Good night.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ju. It's very good. Thank you. I'd like to ask blessings from our Master Jesus and the good spirits that are around us, that they do inspire myself and all of us tonight, just like Ju was inspired tonight. Thank you, Ju. So tonight we're studying chapter 5, continuing the study of chapter 5 already in item 23. It is understandably the longest, one of the longest chapters of the Gospel according to Spiritism. We're studying, as I said, chapter 5, and it's titled "Blessed Are the Afflicted." It seems like Kardec and the spirits were very compelled to give us multiple messages on suffering, on on different ways that we, as spirits, as incarnate spirits, but also spirits, non-incarnated spirits, ways that we suffer, ways that we can work with our suffering, without our suffering, different ways that, different reasons that people suffer. And, because, as the title of the book, the chapter says, "Blessed are the afflicted." So it's it's Jesus was the one who told us that suffering is a blessing, that pain, that loss is a part of growing. It's a part of this evolution that we as spiritual beings are looking, to accomplish. And so to grow and to evolve into higher beings, higher spirits, we are faced with many different ways of suffering. And so we are on way number 23, right? There will be a few more weeks of discussions on suffering still, but hopefully it won't be, hopefully it will be more about, ways that we can think about how to not suffer than ways to suffer. And today, specifically, we're studying voluntary suffering, voluntary torments, as Mackenzie mentioned before. And, people are strange. We're strange, all, in general. And as Kardec points out, as the message points out here, by the way, this is already in the section Instructions from the Spirits, as every chapter in the book usually finishes with instructions from the spirits. And this one is by the spirit Fenelon and Leon, friends, 1860s, when he provided this message. And so he does bring this question. It's very people are very strange. He starts with the premise that I believe we all agree. We're all always looking for happiness. Happiness being the true objective of anyone's life. The spirits, whether we are incarnate or not, that happiness is one of our goals to achieve. And so, he points out man is always looking. That we are always looking for happiness, but happiness just keeps escaping, just keeps evading us, just keeps evading our day to day, right? And he says it is because, and why happiness evades us somewhat is because pure happiness does not exist here on earth. However, as he says, it's not that we can't ever find any sort of happiness. It's just that true happiness, as our understanding and as our as we study what has been left for us as the messages from these same spirits, true happiness is a concept that even if we wanted to achieve, we don't even understand it yet. So we have to grow a little before we get there. But as he says, despite
all of the issues, all of the different difficult situations that we find, um, you know, we still can enjoy relative happiness. And that is something, that is a goal that we can definitely achieve, finding relative happiness. Um, but to find relative happiness, understanding, as we start to understand what true happiness really means, we have to start searching for that happiness in things that can provide us true happiness. So if I look for happiness in things that are perishable, in feelings that are short-lived, in emotions that are short-lived, or um, or you know passions that are not well founded in nature, then it the that happiness that we're going to find is going to be just as short-lived as those things that from where we get that happiness. So, for example, um, a material feeling. Well, I'm really happy when I eat a piece of chocolate. It can be Lindt, it can be Godiva. Some people are happy with Hershey's. I've done some calculations. I think Hershey's, the benefit is not very good. I don't like it too much. Plus, the calories are way too much. So, as long as you're going for something, you got to go for something good. But that is happiness that lasts, how many seconds? Maybe it gives you a little jolt of sugar, and the sugar will make you have that extra energy or that extra jolt of glee, and but it won't last very long, right? Who eats a piece of chocolate and is happy because they ate that piece of chocolate for multiple days, right? So it's not, and so things that make us happy can't be like a piece of chocolate. I'm not saying eating a piece of chocolate isn't good, to each their own, right? Especially those who struggle with the gravitational pull, right? Those of us who have a little extra force downwards pulling them, always hard to enjoy, the extra guilty pleasures of life, right? So we have to learn to balance the things that we are where we seek happiness from. But we're not here to talk about just the small little things like that. Voluntary torments, as being the main topic here. As I said in the beginning, sometimes we're very strange. People are very strange, and the reasons why we do certain things are very strange, right? In the example of chocolate, we say, well, I'm not going to it's 2019, it's January, 2 weeks in, I'm not going to have any chocolate. How many of us have said that on the January 1st, and by the end of the first week, already had enough pieces of chocolate, right? So the motivations behind our needs and our wants and the pleasures that and what we perceive as happiness to us are key to how happy we can actually be, how much of this relative happiness we can actually achieve, within this opportunity of this life that we have. And so Fenelon once brings up a very important point, and at the heart of the point that he's trying to make, says, the only real happiness of this world is to be found in heartfelt peace, but man shows himself avid for all things which agitate and perturb, right? So we understand, and when we look at people who are genuinely happy, we can see that they are having, or they are going through life being, in general, peaceful people with goals that are more guided towards how they interact with others and how people feel around them, more than how they feel or what sorts of things in life they have to or they have versus what I have or versus what we have. And so instead of observing and learning from observation from these people who are truly happy or are peaceful in life, we tend to be agitated and tend to look for things that are will put us in some sort of quick ecstasy, and will drop us from that platform of happiness, that really subtle, weak platform of happiness. So, be it vices, typical vices like drugs or whatever, levels of alcohol or whatever, or having multiple relationships with multiple people at different times and enjoying that and say, this is how I'm happy, and go through life very fast-paced, and having a little bit of that ecstasy of getting something that you thought you needed, but then that always comes with a cliff on the other end that drops you down and brings you back to reality, right? And behind a lot of that is, as Fenelon points out, envy and jealousy. He says, are there any worse sufferings or torments than those that are created by envy and jealousy, right? So how many of us have known people, or maybe have been in situations or have seen situations where someone is so possessive, so jealous of everyone around them, that all they manage to do is talk about themselves or try to sort of sell themselves as better than others all the time. How many people do we know that are just that can't be happy when they see that somebody else has something that they wanted, or somebody else already has something else that they didn't even know they wanted, but now they want that and more, right? Well, so-and-so, wow, got a brand new car. Well, I didn't get a car. I got to go get an SUV, and it's got to be next year's model. So I'm going to go and get in debt for that. And the example of a car for or specific material things like that is a very good analogy. We literally get in debt to satisfy something that we feel in need, to be better than our neighbor, or be better than somebody who I would like to impress, or somebody who is competing with me for attention of somebody else, right? And that debt stays forever, not forever, right? But stays for a very long time, right? And we can see that, and it shows up every month, or it accrues interest, and we pay up, and we pay a lot. We end up paying a lot more than what the car is worth, right? Isn't that? I mean, that's how interest works, right? That's how debt works. And so this suffering that comes from envy, that comes from jealousy, is in the same way, just like the debt that we know in our day-to-day lives, right? We don't even notice it because we think we get that pleasure right away, of showing somebody, oh, see, I showed them that I can also be fancy, or I can also be that I'm also living a good life, or however you want to put it. And yet, that good life that we're trying to project, right? Instead of being a life of, oh, I'm paying off a car because I got to work, or because I need because I need transportation, and so on. It turns into, I really have this big burden in my life because I needed to prove to somebody else or to those around me that I'm worth their attention, or I'm worth them looking at me and thinking of me as such a great person or such a great friend, right? And it's interesting to read something that was written in 1860, this one 1860, about envy and jealousy, and imagine that even after all this time, even after 154 years or 58 years, we are still not even close to solving the problems that jealousy and envy cause in us. And so, that the fruits of this constant need that we have to show to someone else that we're worth more, or that we need to look like we are worth something, keeps holding us down, like the debt that we took that we shouldn't have, the debt that I couldn't afford, but I took it anyways. And that's how these sufferings or these torments work, right? So and Fenelon then points out that for those who are envious or jealous, there is no rest, right? I mean, I'll keep the analogy to debt, right? How easy or how hard is it to finish paying off a credit card, or to finish paying off that car? It seems like 5 years. You think, well, 5 years is going to be quick. Those 5 years take forever because you're paying every single month. And so, we're obviously not here to talk about debt, but I think it's a really good analogy to how we work ourselves into these sufferings that we don't need to create for ourselves, but we keep doing that. And so, and of course, there's so many other ways that we come up with ways that we can suffer. Sometimes self-sabotage, right? Someone, they have to go take an exam. Oh, this is going to be an exam to get into a school or something, and you take the classes, you get prepared, and so on, and you go take the exam and say, yeah, I'm going to do that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to really, really mess up. I'm not going to do well. Well, guess what? That's going to happen. You're basically guaranteeing that you're going to mess up, because or I, or however whoever is acting that way is already projecting that feeling into what they are going to do. And so, do I mean to say that as long as you have confidence, you will ace the test? Not necessarily, right? But if you have the confidence that you will do poorly, you will manage to do that, because that's, and sometimes you might even think, well, that's what I said was going to happen. Hey, I was right. Well, it's not very hard to be right about doing poorly, right? It's very hard. It's much harder to be right about accomplishing something that's hard. But when you are right, or when you do try and you succeed, that's when you get that reward. And with life and with everything that is about our happiness, it's like that test that we have, that we're going to take, and we can act like, I'm going to take that test and I will try my best, and whatever score I get, will be what I get, and I will be satisfied with that. Or we can act like I will do poorly no matter what, and I'm guaranteeing my failure. So with everything in life, if we act that way, that's exactly what we will get back. So, if I'm looking for a job, or if I'm, seeking, meeting somebody new, or whatever it is, if I don't put my best self into it, how do I expect that I'm going to get that job, or an important position, or a promotion, or and so on, and and that works in our day-to-day lives, but it works as our in our spiritual life itself. If I can work on my happiness as something that I will achieve, expect that it will achieve, I have a much better chance of getting that relative happiness that Fenelon is is talking about here, even if it's through the placebo effect, right? Like on last Saturday, we were here listening to Deborah, and she was talking about diseases, and how we can manage to make ourselves sick by thinking that we're sick. Multiple examples of people who end up in the hospital because they have created in themselves a situation where they will be sick. I know a person who has propensity for high blood pressure, and so we went to measure his blood pressure, and it was saying something like 150 over 120, or 15 by 12. And that seemed strange because it was it seemed a little high. And we were just checking. It wasn't like he was feeling anything. And it was saying 150 something. And said, all right, I think that must have been wrong. Let's do it again. And then it said 170 over 125. I was like, no, that can't be true. And he was not feeling anything. And I said, oh, okay, well let's. I think the machine is definitely not working well, because we measured 150, 170. It's like, well, can't trust this machine. And then we just started talking about something else, and he was really worried, and he started feeling sick. I said, okay, well, let's measure this one more time. Let's make sure, if we do a couple measurements, maybe you take the average. I measured it again, 190 over 130. And I said, okay, this just is impossible. And this is within 10, 15 minutes. So he started acting up like he was sick, like he was really starting to feel like symptoms of high blood pressure. So we ended up taking him to urgent care. He gets there, 195 over 130 something. Says, you're about to die. So they gave him something, put it under his tongue and everything. And so in 15 minutes, he went from being okay. I presume that he was actually fine because he wasn't feeling anything. But just the fact that we went to take the measurement of the high blood pressure, it started going up in 15 minutes. Now, yes, some people have more propensity to see that happen, but it shows how our minds, our attitude, can create diseases for ourselves. And so, in the same way, our attitude creates physical suffering, but also creates, sufferings of a more of a moral, spiritual nature. And but in the end, he took that drug that evening, and then took something else, and next day he was fine, and continued fine for that week. And that example, shows us how we can, cause ourselves to be pretty sick physically, and we can keep creating these situations for ourselves. The more we act that way. I met a friend through work, a man through work a while back, and he was living in the United Emirate, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and he got a cancer, and we were talking at some point, and he said the worst part of the whole thing to me is he was Australian actually, and he was living in the UAE, and he said what's really tough for me is to realize that I am 100% sure that I got this cancer because I moved here, because of the way life became really crazy for him after he moved there. And he was, I don't know, early 60s or something, so he was in a position where he just needed to work 2 or 3 more years and say, okay, I'm done with this, we're going back to Australia with his wife. And he said, I am absolutely sure that everything that happened, that this cancer is because of me moving here, because of all the stress that life life is here. And he did this as he was telling me how hard it was to do business in the, with different people, because there was always so much corruption. And he said, well, when I moved here, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to deal with anybody that had to be bought or anything. And he said there was almost no business that you could do internationally that could be done without some sort of bribery. And so he found something in I think it was ship parts and so on is what he sold the most. But he used to do sort of distribution of high-tech equipment. But unfortunately, for him, it was about 6 months after we had this conversation, his wife sent us an email saying he hadn't survived the cancer. But it was very interesting to me, this meeting with this guy, because he realized, he said, it's just the stress of how I'm living life, just what changed in my life that caused me this. And again, showing us, and in his case, he was very he had a very interesting spiritual philosophy, if you will. And he had this conscience that this had happened to him because of his move, and he said, I'm going to try to fight this, and but as soon as I can, I'm going to leave here. And unfortunately, he didn't even last long enough for that. So, but just like the Deborah was talking to us on Saturday. But then there's the placebo effect, right? And that's where I wanted to get to. It's not how we can make ourselves sick, but how we can actually make ourselves well. How we can actually take something that is a pill that all it has is some dust and some sugar, and you take that with water, and how that can have a similar effect to a drug that is designed for a specific purpose, right? And people will take a placebo, and just in that belief and that faith that this will work for them, they will get the effects of the cure that they're looking for. And that's the beauty of life. And and of the cures for our own suffering. We can always whine, we can always cry, we can always create little tragedies in our lives, trying to get more people around us, and for people to look at us and say, well, I really need to be this person's friend, or we can be needy and so on. But ultimately, all that does is actually ultimately push people away, because the only people that I can attract, if all I'm doing is acting with envy, is acting with jealousy, are the people who will be feeling exactly the same way, and will be with their envy and with their jealousy fighting back in the same way that I am acting with them or around them. So it's very this sort of way to act is very pernicious, and it causes us suffering. And what's really weird is that it's pretty clear when you look from the outside when somebody is causing themselves suffering. So, for example, drugs, right? How many times, how easy is it for somebody to get out of a path of drugs without somebody else from the outside telling them you've gone too far? It takes outside intervention usually for somebody to get out of that path. And as they say in the treatments, you never stop being an addict, right? But it usually takes somebody from the outside. Why is it that it always takes somebody on the outside telling us that, when we can observe and see how going in that direction, using drugs and starting in that path, has really no possible way of having a good ending to anybody, right? And yet, how many human beings go in that direction anyways? But that's the and that's the general message here is envy and jealousy are like this drug, right? We think we are getting something out of it, right? That happiness of feeling better than everybody else, the happiness of feeling like I'm more deserving than others. But just like the drug, when I see somebody else in a better position or with something that I don't have, that really hurts me way more than any pleasure that I can get from it, right? So, and then we don't even realize that these are sufferings that we're causing to ourselves, and that's the sadness behind the whole thing, right? And I don't know. I haven't really. I mean, there's always disbelief. I always thought this was weird, but there's always disbelief by a lot of people that being jealous is a good thing for a relationship. But to tell you the truth, I've met a lot of people who are very jealous, and I've never met a person who's very jealous also very happy. Because we're always creating a condition where we can't be happy because we can't stop thinking about what could happen if it were, if I couldn't trust that person, couldn't be trusted. And so when we get into a situation like that, where pure jealousy is what drives the relationship, then what you have really is a lack of trust more than a care for each other. All we have is a lack of trust. Now, those, and my point is that those are two very different things. And so, going then back a little to the Spirit's book, just to bring some more ideas on these on voluntary torments and voluntary privations, voluntary sufferings. Kardec asks to the spirits on question number 726, right? As we study about spiritual evolution, we understand that suffering is important, right? That's the whole point of chapter. That's the whole story that we've been studying in chapter 5 here. And so Kardec asks this very interesting question. He's very probing and very logical with his questioning. And so he says, if the sufferings of this world elevates us through the manner in which we bear them, so meaning the spirits have just explained a little before this that suffering itself is not enough, or is not really what allows me to evolve as a spirit. Is basically how I deal with that suffering, is how I can bear that suffering. So if the way that his question then, if suffering and the way that we bear that suffering is how we elevate ourselves, are we then elevated by those that suffering which we voluntarily create for ourselves? And so the spirits go and answer, the only sufferings that can elevate you are those which come upon you naturally, because they are inflicted by God. So it's funny because I remember when I was about maybe 10, 11 years old, I remember studying this at home, and I asked my dad, there was, what if, I said, well, if suffering is good, and somebody likes to suffer, if I make them suffer, then I'm giving them what they want, and I'm told that you're supposed to give people, do to people what they want, right? So, or if I say, if somebody likes to suffer, and the message is do to others what you would like to be done to you, and you like to suffer, you like pain, shouldn't you be giving pain to others? Or isn't that what they want? Shouldn't you give that? And his answer, which still to this day I couldn't think of how they came up with the answer so quickly. He said, well, maybe for that person, if that's what you want, or if you like to suffer and you want to give suffering to somebody else, or pain to somebody else, and even they like to suffer, maybe. However, that person has a mom, right? Now, does his mom like to suffer, right? And if not, then maybe you can't do that, because now you're making somebody else suffer. So the answer is always no matter how you look at it, because there is nothing you can do to one person that makes them suffer, even if that's what they want, that won't make a whole lot of other people suffer as well. So, in relationships, in families, this happens all the time, right? As couples are going through a separation or a divorce, a lot of times, the husband or the wife, they'll try to make each other suffer, right? And even if that's warranted, that would be one thing. But what about the kid that's watching this, and vice versa? So, nothing that we ever do to ourselves, and that was kind of the bottom line of that questioning. It was, if I'm masochist, and I like suffering, what would happen? It's like, well, I'm sure your family doesn't like you to suffer, and that falls very, very much with the question of drugs, for example, right? I mean, no matter what I do, if I think if I'm trying to help somebody who's an addict, and I'm trying to help them by giving them exactly what they want, that might relieve their suffering that moment, but it just makes the suffering of those around them go even longer. So so the answer then, that the spirits gave, the only sufferings that can elevate you are those that come from you naturally. And I think the key to a lot of what Kardec says, or the spirit's answer to Kardec all the time, is about the question of usefulness. How useful is something? So if you are creating a suffering to yourself, let's say, I don't know, somebody is in a car that's starting to catch fire, and you're going to go in there and you know that you're going to get burned. You know that you're risking your life. There's somebody there, and you're trying to save them. The question is it useful? Is your suffering, the suffering that you're creating at that point to yourself, useful to somebody else? And if so, then that is a valid suffering. All right? And that's kind of the bottom line of the argument here. It says, if all you do is create a hardship for you, but that hardship doesn't really affect anybody else except for you, then all you're doing is wasting your time. People who will, hit themselves or go live in hunger just because they believe they will achieve some sort of better spiritual condition. The answer from the spirits is no. There's nothing really in that will help you. But if you're causing yourself if you're causing yourself some privations, and you are giving something to someone else in exchange, and so you're going hungry because somebody else who's hungry next to you is being fed. That's a completely different story, because you are being useful to others. So the Spirit says, let them clothe the naked, let them comfort those who mourn, let them work for those who are sick, let them impose privations upon themselves for the sake of those who are unfortunate and needy, and then your life will be useful. So if you're looking for a way to suffer, right, then suffer for others. Suffer because you are dividing what you have and giving it to others. That's a valid voluntary suffering. But if you're just going to do it for yourself, that's selfishness, right? And so in question 933, he asks, men are often the artisans of their own worldly sufferings. Are they also the artisans of their moral sufferings? Right? So in recognition that we sometimes create our own worldly sufferings, do we also do it to ourselves as moral sufferings? And the Spirit says even more so. Envy, again, jealousy, avarice. And so they see here, much of the unhappiness of human life is a result of the undue importance we give to the things of this world. He who finds his happiness only in the satisfaction of price and of gross material appetites is unhappy when he cannot satisfy them. So if I'm looking for a way to be happy, I should look for a way to be happy on something that will last. If I know that making those around me happy can make me happy, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can work on making those around me happy, whether they are my family, whether they're somebody I've never met, whether they are somebody from work. If I am working towards making sure that nobody around me is suffering, or that I can give some solace to those around me, then and I can find pleasure in that myself, then that is the sort of fulfilling, everlasting promise of happiness. Even if in this world we only have relative happiness, we can extend that relative happiness for a very long time. And so to finish his message here from Fenelon, he says, many torments will be avoided by those who are content with what they have, who can see things they do not possess without envy, and who do not try to appear better than they are. They will be constantly rich, since by looking below oneself, it is always possible to see others with less than ourselves. These kind of people are calm because they do not create imaginary necessities for themselves. Is calmness then not a happiness in the midst of the turmoil of life? So that's the message Fenelon has for us, is, seeking good behaviors, is seeking good people around us, is seeking to make others happy, and they will make, and being happy in that accomplishment, being happy in making those around us, not with vanity, but with the feeling that you've changed somebody else's lives, and for sure that changes your life as well. So I hope this can be a little bit of an inspirational message to all of us to think a little better about our happiness, our priorities, what we have to work on each day, and be happy, everyone. Thank you. Have a good night.
So with this talk about voluntary torments or sufferings, before we go to our final prayer, I'd like to say again and remind everyone about Divaldo Franco, that he will be here once again. He's 92 years old. 92 years old, still traveling, still doing his lectures, his seminars all around the world. And so he will be here once again on February 23rd at 2 p.m. at the Holiday Inn in Somerville. He's going to be talking about fraternity for a better world, and all the proceedings that for the tickets, which are $50, are to benefit the Mention on the Way in Salvador, Bahia. And it with the $50, of course, you can watch the presentation and get a book from the list. So we have some tickets here, so if you want to buy some, we have the tickets here, but you can also buy those tickets online at akssma.com. So you can go there and buy the tickets. Usually tickets fly very quickly, so if you want to guarantee your place, they only sent us 15 tickets, so we still have them. We got them Saturday, so we still have them here. And I guess that's it for, well, this weekend on Saturday, we're gonna have a special guest talking to us on Saturday night, which is sitting right there. It's gonna be in Portuguese. Maximi, it's one of my brothers, squared brothers, like it's brother times brother. And The other brother was talking here before, so we are in three. And so he will be here talking about the poor of spirit. It's a whole chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism, and I was telling him that he was here talking to us almost exactly a year ago. It's 364 days later. He's back giving us another talk. So it will be this next Saturday. Reminding everyone to at least once a week, if we want to do so, at our in our homes, do the gospel at home, where we open up a book. We can open up the Gospel according to Spiritism, a book of small inspirational messages, and read and reflect on that message. So we can also invite the good spirits and Jesus to our house. It's always a good measure to bring light to ourselves, to our home, and to our neighborhood, our neighbors, and all the places that surround us there. And with that, we'd like to are we going to have the passes? So we're going to have the passes. So if you want to take the passes, we just invite everyone to keep sitting down, and Adriana and Chris will invite you guys to the passes. And right after that, we come back to do our final prayer.